heat, right? Not a bad thing all the way around.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah,
Hello?
it is, but
Okay.
we're waiting for Pat.
Okay.
He has to put the Facebook and the YouTube people up. We'll see. You will notice that Jen and Sharon and Pat are all coordinated in orange, signifying how hot it is. I know, but I think it's a riot that you're all doing that. Right. And all right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, virtual audience. Thank you all for coming out tonight. I'm delighted to have Mary back. We did a virtual event for the photographer. How long ago was that?
21.
So it's been a bit.
4 years.
Right.
It's hard to believe.
It was
It
her.
was-
It was her first event. She was terrified.
It's true. I was, but Barbara was so kind and warm and generous that made it easy.
Wonderful.
Made it easy.
I'm so glad we could do it. And here you are with a new book, Marguerite. Is it in or by? By the lake. Well, she's also in the lake. That's another question. And I'm really pleased to have a debut author, Kelsey Cox, here tonight. You're not terrified, are you?
I mean,
Maybe a
I'm
little?
always a little nervous. Once we get started, I always kind
You'll
of
be fine.
just go.
Wonderful. Okay.
Yeah.
So for those of you who read the e-news, you'll know that I wrote an essay to you today about the Gothic. During COVID, just in case you didn't, or for the virtual audience, Jane Ann Krentz and J.T. Ellison and I did a series of programs, and it started when they asked me what I thought the next big thing would be in 2020. And I thought it would be the Gothic. This is an ancient form in which I really like. And during COVID, people either wanted to read cozies for comfort, romantasy for complete escape, or horror because it was worse than the horrors around us. But I thought that the Gothic, which combines several of these features, would do really well. And sure enough, it has. So both of these ladies have written a Gothic. Now, let's talk about the scenery of the crime, because a Gothic really requires a truly great house, estate, castle. The first Gothic that probably anybody much paid attention to was called the Castle of Otranto by Horace Walpole in 17 whatever it was. And then there's the Fall of the House of Usher by Poe. So almost always, Rebecca, we all know about, even though it's not called Manderley. So we have to have a great house. So Kelsey, tell us about your house.
So my book is set in Bulverde, which is in the Texas Hill Country, and my house is this Victorian Queen Anne style mansion set high up on a cliff that has been abandoned for over 100 years, and this couple moves in to renovate it, and that's kind of the setting. But the house has a rumored history of being haunted by this ghost called the Mother.
It does. And in the rehab, amazingly, the whole back of this house is now, a wall of glass, right?
Yes.
Which is a critical part of the
Yes,
story,
yes.
as it all turns out. Yeah.
Yes. So when renovating it, they modernize it quite a bit, and part of that is they decide to tear off the entire back wall and make it entirely glass so that the people down below can see. So it looks like a dollhouse.
And let's see, Mary, tell us about, is yours a house, an estate, or both?
It's a house and an estate, and it's called Rosecliff. And the name Rosecliff is fitting because the Marguerite and Jeffrey Gray, the owners of the estate, Marguerite is a garden designer, an influencer, and she grows beautiful roses. And she is known for her beautiful gardens and kind of lifestyle, but especially her gardens, her trees, and her roses especially. And the young woman, Phoenix, is the young gardener who works for Marguerite. She's actually the one that executes everything. She is the one who makes it really beautiful, though Marguerite gets all the credit for it. Marguerite, towards the beginning of the book, this isn't a spoiler, Marguerite dies in a somewhat mysterious way near the beginning of the book. And she, even after she's gone, she looms large in the house. So it's sort of a similar vibe. She is, there's a painting, a famous painting of her over the fireplace. And Phoenix, the young gardener who becomes entangled with Geoffrey Gray, Marguerite's widow, she kind of finds herself moving into this house, but she can't get away from Marguerite because Marguerite's voice follows her everywhere she goes in the house.
I sort of thought about Martha Stewart, with whom I once did an event when I was reading this. So, you know, she larger than life influencer,
Yes, exactly.
designer, creator of
Exactly.
beautiful things, and extremely difficult. Right. So each of your books really begins with a death and begins with a fall.
Yeah,
So, you know, I mean, it's really weird. It's almost like you two were, you know, channeling each other.
I know. When I read Marguerite by the Lake, I was like, there are so many similarities. They're very different books. They follow different plot lines, but there are so many similarities.
There really are.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, there's somebody that falls to their death, and there's this kind of Gothic estate mansion, and there's also a younger woman who is living in a house that still belongs to another woman,
Right.
even if it doesn't literally belong to her. So
And there's a second wife thing going
Yeah.
on
Yeah,
in
yeah.
both books.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
and a slightly insecure second wife.
yes,
And your second wife, well, the second wife in your case she might be a little bit nicer than the second wife in my case.
Well, now we're in Rebecca territory as we.
that's what I was like. Rebecca is all over this.
Yeah, well, you know, but the thing that's so great is that the basic blueprint of the Gothic can be adapted. It can be adapted to contemporary or historical. Now, your case, you have multiple narrators, which I think is really an interesting way to tell this story. So tell us who the people are in your book.
Yeah, so my book, Party Liars, is about a Sweet 16. So it's like a lavish Sweet 16 in the Texas Hill Country that turns deadly. And it's told from the perspective not of the birthday girl, but a lot of the women surrounding her. So it's her mother, who no longer lives in the house, her stepmother, who has kind of assumed the role of the lady of the manor, her best friend, so another 16-year-old girl, and her new baby half-sister, I guess, her nanny, who is this older Irish woman. And so those are the four women that kind of they all have secrets or lies, and those lies intertwine in a way that ends up at a death at this party.
Well, I mean, to have a Gothic, you do have to have secrets.
Yes.
I mean, the house is the setting and encloses everybody, but the people who live in it or on the estate or whatever are what really power the story. So you've already mentioned that in your case, the owner of the estate dies at the very beginning. In your case, it's the husband,
Yeah.
the father of the 16-year-old girl, so he's with us.
Yeah.
And we actually hear from him at one point.
Too.
Yeah, we do. Right. Are we okay there, Pat? Do we have to start over? Sorry, we'll just give it a moment here to see if we can repair it. The heat makes us really vulnerable, unfortunately. Very true.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. Everyone's always asking me if I back everything up, and I'm like, probably not as much as I should.
I know. Well, you can't.
I know.
Is it gone?
I know.
Is it just gone?
I can't rewrite it.
It'd probably be better if you stay here. Well, we can switch to a phone if you can't get the camera to work. All right, you want to check it? This is what happens when the staff multitask. All right, virtual audience, sorry, we had a camera failure, but we're back. I don't know what we missed. So maybe we'll go back and repeat slightly. So let me go back and ask you to tell us about your characters again, just in case anybody missed it.
Yeah, in case anyone missed. So Party Liars is set at a Sweet 16 that turns deadly in the Texas Hill Country in this big mansion that is rumored to be haunted. But it's told from the perspective of 4 women that kind of circle around the birthday girl. So there is the birthday girl's mother, Kim, who is no longer living in the house, even though she kind of renovated it with all of her blood, sweat, and tears. There is her new stepmother, who is this young influencer, baking influencer. There is her best friend, so another 16-year-old girl, and there's her baby sister's new nanny, who is this late 60s, early 70s Irish nanny.
Right. I love the fact that she's a baking influencer. Yeah. We didn't mention that before we went dark there, but
Yeah.
So there's some fun food that occurs, and a particularly interesting cake as part of the birthday thing, right? So anyway, all right, over to you. Who is the narrator of your story?
The narrator of my story is young Phoenix, the young, beautiful gardener who's been working for Marguerite and Jeffrey Gray for a number of years. And at the opening of the book, there's a big garden party, and Marguerite is talking, and it's a happens to be a book party actually, and she's talking to all her guests and regaling them, and Phoenix is at the garden party, and she sees a tree that she knows is vulnerable, and she knows she's been saying for months that this tree is very vulnerable and that Marguerite should take it down, and Marguerite has not paid attention. And so she sees, because the wind's picking up, there's a storm coming on, and she sees that the tree is like really, really making her nervous. So she tries to get everyone's attention because the tree's right there near where everyone's gathered. And no one's listening to her, And she finally starts to panic, and the tree starts to fall. It's like a 100-foot tree. And Jeffrey Gray is in the path of the tree. And she runs at the top speed, knocks him out of the way, and he barely escapes the tree, like within inches. So that incident bonds them romantically, young, beautiful Phoenix and Jeffrey Gray, and they become romantically involved, and shortly thereafter, Marguerite dies in a somewhat mysterious way. And so Phoenix finds herself moving into the grand Rosecliff mansion, but what she doesn't realize is that Marguerite may have died, but Marguerite did not leave. Marguerite is still there.
Ooh, how's that? I know. Plus, we already know about the painting, right? So I was interested in Party of Liars that the first wife, I can't remember the husband's name. What's his? Ethan, right, thank you. That Ethan's first wife was really the person that did the renovations.
Yeah, they renovated it, the majority of the renovations together when they didn't have as much money. He kind of comes into money right after their divorce and is able to complete the renovations, but they did a lot of it by hand together. And so Kim, the ex-wife, is very bitter about this fact that she put so much time and effort into renovating this house, and now it seems like she renovated it for Danny, who's the new young 27-year-old wife that has kind of just stepped into her life.
Well, she doesn't actually do the sensible thing and move away.
Yes.
Kim, she's still there. The reasons for the divorce are not immediately apparent, but will eventually become clear. And I thought that was an interesting feature. So when you were writing it, did you do any like choreography? I mean, you've got the house and the whole bit. So how did you, as you were moving through the action, did you, I don't know how visual you are because we haven't talked before, but did you see how the house and the whole estate would be the setting, the scenery of the action?
Yeah, so I initially there is a house in Bulverde which is where I live, that inspired it a little bit. It's not haunted as far as I know, and it's not a Queen Anne style Victorian, but it's a house on this cliff, and I drive by it often. And it's way up on this cliff, and it has a lot of windows in the back, and it looks so close to the edge of the cliff that it looks like the limestone has eroded beneath it. Like, I don't know that I would want to be in this house. And so that was, it was something that just caught my creativity, and the seed kind of was born there. But I also did a lot of research. I always do, especially for setting. I always have to know what the house looks like, it always has to make sense to me how the characters are moving about in a room. So I took a lot of details for the architecture. There's another house called the Sequist House that is a few hours away from where I live in Mason, Texas, that was built by German immigrants. It's a Victorian style mansion made of limestone. And so I learned a lot about that history. You can go and tour that house. And then I also just, as far as the contemporary updated renovations, I did a lot of like Zillow searching or Realtor.com, like taking all of these, and I made kind of a Pinterest board, or I use Scrivener, which that's a program you can use to write, but I kind of dump everything in there of all of my inspo pics. So I would pull those up, and I would have like a really good idea of what the room looked like or what the kitchen looked like. So
I thought it was a real house, just
Mhm.
because it is so vivid and so unusual, and like it's so shocking in the depiction of it.
yeah.
There are a number of crime shows, particularly French crime shows, which I'm addicted to on MHC TV, as I probably mentioned to you. And it's astonishing how many of these old houses have done exactly what Kelsey is talking about, which is they have taken out the whole back of the house and made it glass. So it's looking back towards the garden. I also think, from a safety standpoint, as, people are running around with guns and trying to kill them, the people who live in those houses, maybe glass wasn't their best idea, I mean, so,
Yeah.
but, trying to do it with bulletproof, I don't know, maybe it is. Maybe the kind of glass that you would need. I hadn't thought about that. For that house, maybe it would be sort of bulletproof.
Yeah, I actually did a lot of research into glass and like because I also have a glass balcony that that someone falls off of, and I had to research like how safe are glass balconies, how likely is it that this balcony could break. So I did a lot of research to figure that out.
You should have sent her up to the Grand Canyon, right? Where is it the
Oh,
Hulaway
yeah.
Indian? They built that whole glass bridge that you can walk. Oh, Lord! And
I have been to
didn't
the
they have
Grand
to
Canyon,
close
but I
it
have
for?
not.
Didn't they have to close it for maintenance or something? I don't think anybody's actually fallen off it, although people seem to be falling into the canyon more regularly this year than. Yeah, no, they do. But I think I remember that there was like a maintenance problem with this glass bridge, and the Millennial Bridge in London, which I walked over a year ago last June, is glass.
Is it glass on the
Yeah,
bottom?
and I think it's the Millennial Bridge, a bridge anyway,
Yeah.
over the Thameses line. I find that really unnerving.
Yeah. Well, my sister used to work at the Texas State Aquarium, and I like so the glass that's used for those exhibits has to be incredibly strong, So so that was something I thought about,
Especially with the sharks.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would not be a happy thought. Right, I like it. So I also thought, Mary, that, you must really have had to sort of map out this estate, the location of the tree, where the party was going to be, and there is a lake, right?
There is a lake, yes. I did map out the tree. I drew the tree, and I did a drawing of the tent where the party is and where the cliff is. And there's a reference that Marguerite wants a certain backdrop for her when she's speaking. She wants people to see her with the lake in the background and this particular sunset in the background. And so I had a bunch of different constraints, so I had to figure out where the tree could possibly be, where it would fall on Jeffrey Gray, and I did like several different drawings
Sure.
and different configurations to be like, well, could it be here? No, the tree couldn't be there. It could be here. It could be.
Well, that's right. You don't want it to take out the house. You just want it to be a close call for Jeffrey,
Exactly.
right?
Yes, exactly. But that's kind of fun. I mean, that part of it is kind of fun, like trying to nail down, make this place feel very real to me, so that hopefully it will feel more real to the readers.
Our giant sorrel lost its second big limb the other day, and I thought to myself, it would be terrible to have been underneath it because the swirl, because of taking in all the water, are incredibly heavy.
Yeah.
I think we spent ages ago, 20 years ago, something like $800 to get a crane to move it from the back to the front because it was going to grow too big for the house. But so you could actually do this all over again and have a death by sorrow, which would be sort of fun. I know, love it. So Kelsey, we don't know who died in your book, but in your book we do know that it was Marguerite. So how does that dictate how you're going to tell the story? If we know who died, is the question not who died but why?
Yes, the question is. We know who died. It is on the back of the book or the inside flap of the book. Now, some people might want to read to page 35 and not know that Marguerite dies, but I don't feel like it's a spoiler because it happens so early on. Marguerite dies, and the situation, the circumstances around it are unclear, and Phoenix's involvement or lack of involvement is a little unclear. And so as the book progresses, Phoenix is worried that someone's going to point the finger at her, and she's trying to avoid being noticed and avoid having the detective think of her as a possible suspect. And all the while, the reader is not so sure whether or not we should all be suspecting Phoenix or whether she is in fact completely innocent and just, has happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Well, she's not in the wrong place in the wrong time if she moves in with Jeffrey into the house where the woman died and then marries him. I mean, it's like holding up your hand and saying, no, I didn't. Right. So your story is an interesting one in that you don't want us to know who falls off the balcony.
Yeah.
You saved that to the end. So how did that affect how much you had each character say so that we didn't have a spoiler too soon?
Well, that part wasn't too hard because I'm very close in the character's head. They're all first person point of view, so they don't know that anything's going to happen when they're at the party. But I think what I loved about not revealing who dies until towards the end is that it allows the reader to play even more with that puzzle of trying to anticipate what's going to happen. So when you're getting the characters interacting with each other and the interactions are kind of hopefully infused with this kind of underlying tension, hopefully the reader is playing this game of, oh, I wonder if that person's going to die, or I wonder if this person has a motive to kill, and so you get a lot more possibilities.
Well, you do. And since you're telling it first person for each of the characters, we don't know if they're telling us the truth or not, do we? No.
Yeah.
So I think an interesting question all the way through is who's lying. In your case, we don't know what to think about Phoenix. So but I think that's part of a Gothic too, is that, there should be like a heavy cloud of suspicion over everybody. And as the secrets are gradually revealed, then we get to a conclusion.
Yeah, I think Gothic literature often has that descent into madness.
Yeah.
You don't quite, and yours does so well, but you don't quite know. It's the unreliable narrator. You don't quite know if you can believe their perception of things. And I think that's definitely true
Yeah.
of
I think-
Phoenix.
Alice Feeney wrote one. I can't remember the title at the moment, but she wrote a Gothic that required absolute suspension of disbelief. It was set, and there was a beach, and there's an old house in Dorset, and sorry, Alice, I'll try to remember the name of it, but it was an extreme Gothic. Riley Sager has written various. I mean, it's really interesting. Lisa Scottolini's book that she'll be here to sign on the 23rd is a Gothic set in Tuscany, and imports an American to an old estate in Tuscany, and she has no idea why suddenly she's inherited it and didn't know who it was. So, I think it's a form that everybody's sort of playing with at the
I
moment.
know.
Yeah,
It's interesting.
It does seem
Well,
like
we're
it.
in uncertain times, and I think that literature reflects that.
That's true. That's a good point. It
No, it's a
is.
bad point. Sorry, it's really a bad point. But I mean, I do, and I find this dichotomy between the real rise of horror. I mean, really stark horror, horrifying horror, and the super cozy. Maybe the Gothic is a kind of a bridge in part
Yeah, that's
between. It's
interesting.
not
It
it's
is.
not as extreme as either of those, but all of them, I think, give us a chance to step out of the real world and into something. Maybe we feel it's more manageable. I don't know. I mean,
It's
I'm reading
interesting.
nonfiction at the moment. That's been my solution. I've read 3 or 4 in the last couple of
That's the-
days that I
that's
thought
the
were
least
marvelous.
escapism.
Oh, right.
You just wanna
Well,
be in the real
historical
world.
historical fiction's doing well too, because at least those are people we know how it all came out.
Yeah.
You know.
There's something very comforting. You can grab onto it, and you're not going to be thrown.
Yeah. No, absolutely true. So I don't think that the Gothic allows sequels. So would I be right in saying that your story, when it's done, was done for your
Yes.
characters?
Yeah, for me, yeah. I've never thought about books in the sequel, as a series, I guess, because I always think that the characters are going through this arc that gives that, like, I've actually heard one of my favorite authors is Tana French, the Irish mystery author, and I've heard her say this in interviews. But she's talked about how the arcs that she puts her characters through, like if you went through multiple arcs like that, you would just be like clinically insane. Like you cannot go through that many life-changing experiences. And so I think that's how I feel similarly. Although there are very wonderful series, but I think the way that I think of my characters, I want them to go through this arc. And so in order to do that, the story kind of has to be finished.
So one could assume if you're writing a second book, and generally today publishers don't want to invest in a single book
Yeah.
from an author. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So you're going to write something different.
Yes, I have. I've already written the first draft of the second book, but it is a standalone. That is also a kind of locked room whodunit set in the Texas Hill Country.
Staying close to home, are you?
Yes, I am. And I don't know that I always will write in the Texas Hill Country, but I do love where I live. And right now, I find a lot of inspiration from it. It's also just in a practical sense, it's easy to write about somewhere that you know so well because you can
Yeah.
pull all the details. I know where these people would go to lunch or where they would go on a fancy date or anything. I know what the weather's like or what type of trees there are. I've lived a lot of places in my life, though. My dad was in the Navy, so it's not out of the realm that I could write somewhere else. But right now, I am very inspired by the Texas Hill Country.
How about you?
My next book and where it takes place, or just anything about the next book or
Any-
series,
or is there a next
is there
book?
a next book?
Yeah, that was the
Um,
basic question. Thank you.
Is there a next book? Well, I also am in the boat that I don't see Marguerite by the Lake being part of a series. I think it's over. I mean, who knows? I'll never say never, but it could happen one day. But Phoenix, so much is, I hope, revealed about Phoenix during Marguerite by the Lake that I feel like I told her story and it's done, and I'm not going to go back to it, at least not right away. And there is another book coming, but it's very early for me to talk about it because it's still in such a very rough form that I barely know what it's about.
Well, I think the critical part was that you're writing another book. You know,
Yes.
that's all right. I always feel that people, if they've come here to listen to you and invested you, you know, some time, if nothing else, would like to think that there's going to be more of a payoff down the road. So,
Most
how about
definitely.
questions from you in the audience? Do you have any questions? I'm going to repeat them too because it's hard for the people watching it if they won't know what you're answering if I don't repeat the question. So everybody's just sitting here. Come on, guys.
Gothic says as a genre, are the ends always somewhat open-ended? I mean, that's part of them. They can go in any direction.
So the question is, are Gothics always open-ended, or can they go in different directions? The ending, sorry. Is that what you meant? Yeah.
I think for mine, there's definitely a clear resolution that's given to the events of the book. I think as far as thematically and atmospherically, I have a ghost in mine, or a rumored ghost, and I think whether the ghost exists or not, that and kind of, I guess thematically, there's hopefully things that people can kind of continue to think about and draw their own conclusions or reread and find new nuances. But on a plot level, I also hope that I give my readers a satisfactory conclusion. Does that answer your question?
I think that in Marguerite by the Lake specifically, there's definitely a conclusion, but it is a little bit open to interpretation. And I don't know if that's Gothic or the one thing that we touched on earlier that I think is Gothic is this question of is it insanity or is it supernatural? And like the Telltale Heart, like many Gothic stories, books, it's never quite clear. So that could be true for Marguerite by the Lake, is like that you're not 100% certain how much of what happened is Phoenix like losing her grip on reality or how much is some supernatural force that has entered into the situation.
Oh, I've always liked the phrase fevered imagination, you know, which I think covers a lot of ground. But it's not an Agatha Christie sort of story structure. Pat, did you have an online question? Oh, okay. Well, come and get my microphone, or nobody will be able to hear you.
All right. So first of all, the first question's for you, Kelsey. So one of our online audience members wants to know, how much research did you do for the party? And also, specifically in terms of types of glass, like the difference between bulletproof and hurricane proof.
I don't know that the way I do research is so scattered, like, and I read so much and then it'll end up as one line, you know? But I would not go to me for expertise on like what kind of glass you should choose. But if I dig through my Scrivener file, I might have the answer. So I did a lot of random Googling.
So in that same vein of the question, what was the process like of writing and getting published for your very first novel? The audience online is really curious. What did you go through? What were the pains? How many books did you write before you became a published writer? Can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
I have quite a few books in the drawer. So I've wanted to write since I was probably 9 years old. I wrote, little stories in my notebook. I was the kid that would bring a book to recess instead of playing on the playground. I was a reader, and I wanted to do that. So I tried to write my first novel in middle school. Didn't finish that one. tried another novel in high school, didn't finish that one, and then wrote a novel that I finished in high school. So I was 17, so this is like 20 plus years ago. And then I ended up going to school for creative writing, wrote a lot of short stories. When I finished my MFA program, I wrote a novel for my thesis, and that was the first novel that I queried agents with. And I think that was 2011. So that was my first time getting a bunch of rejections. And it was like years of rejections. And then I decided to try another novel. So I wrote another novel. And that was the first mystery that I wrote. So I had been writing kind of literary fiction before that for grad school. And I decided I needed the confines of a genre. And I went to a genre that I loved, which is mystery thrillers. And then I immersed myself in that, reading a bunch of craft books, reading a bunch of books in the genre. It happened to be, I think, the year that Gone Girl came out by Gillian Flynn. So that was like a huge influence, and also just a blessing because it was great. And it also came with this surge of amazing psychological thrillers. And so I wrote that book, and I did get my agent finally. I revised it a bunch, and I finally got my agent, and then we revised it more together, and I sent it out on sub, and it did not get picked up. And then I had 2 babies back to back, and I decided to quit writing because I had no time for it with babies. And then I had told my sisters I quit writing. Like, I had been doing this for about 20 years. Nobody wants to read what I'm writing. And I was feeding my kids lunch. I have 2 little girls. I was feeding them lunch, and I was on my hands and knees cleaning up peas that they had spilled. And I had the idea for this book, and I decided to write it. So I had quit writing for about 2 weeks. And I threw myself into writing this book, and finally it sold. So it was amazing when it sold.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Mary, you're not too removed from this. I mean, this is book 2 for you. So how about you? What was your process like?
My process was, I was working as a journalist. I was working at a newspaper, and there was a lot of upheaval at this newspaper. The newspaper was eventually sold, and around the time it was sold, there was political intrigue and backstabbing and people vying for power, and I left the newspaper finally, and then I felt like this urgent need to write that story of what had happened at the newspaper, and because I was sort of traumatized by the whole by the whole thing. So I did write that book. I wrote that book when I was pregnant with my daughter, and that book did not sell. I got an agent, not the agent that I have now, and sent it around, and people said some nice things about it, but no one bought it. There were a couple of people that said, if she were to do X, Y, and Z, I would take another look. So that sort of slowed me down in a way, because I thought, oh, I'll change this, I'll change that, maybe then this person will reconsider. But the truth was, it was really time to move on. And finally, I recognized it was time to move on and go to another book. And then that's when I wrote The Photographer, and The Photographer sold. So I was thrilled with that. I got, that time round, I got a wonderful agent, and everything kind of fell into place. But it took a while.
Yeah.
It took a while.
I had similarly, I worked on each book for far longer than I should have.
Right, because you keep thinking.
I kept thinking I was almost there. But I think even that was good. It taught me things, you know?
Right.
I think every book that didn't sell taught me more about how to write a book. So I don't regret it, you know?
So Stefania had a question. I think it's for all 3 of you, because I think that each of you will have a really unique perspective on this. In order to write a book in a particular genre? Do you have to be a fan of the genre first, or do you develop kind of a love as you start writing whatever book it is that you're writing in?
Well, I'm not the author, but it's hard for me to imagine if you want to write a Gothic that you do have to sort of learn the basics of the genre. You don't have to be a fan of it necessarily, but I think that you need to read it and then decide whether it's for you. What was your experience?
I would agree. It's hard for me to imagine wanting to write a book that you wouldn't want to read, I guess. I like the one thing that with this book, I wanted to write the exact kind of book that I would want to pick up. And so, because I think if there's somebody, if I'm feeling these things or if I would enjoy this, then there has to be someone else out there that would. And so, so I just think it only makes sense that you would be a fan of the genre. Though I guess if you had an idea for a story and then you threw yourself into learning about the genre, I could see that. And that sort of a little bit happened to me. I always loved mystery, but I read very diversely when I was young. I loved fantasy. I loved romance when I was a teenager. And I read mysteries with my mom. I read specifically, my mom loves Anne Perry. She writes like Victorian mysteries, and so we would read all of those together. And but then I read diversely through college, and so when I decided I wanted to write a genre book, I thought the only one that I felt called to, I guess, was mystery, but I had to kind of re-familiarize myself with the genre. So I read everything. I read like very political spy thrillers. I read cozies, and I found that kind of a domestic suspense psychological thriller was what I really liked as a reader. And then I just kind of voraciously read that genre to learn everything that could be done with the genre and find who I loved and wanted to be inspired by. But I don't know. I think you need that step of reading. So
Yeah. I agree with everything you said. I think that I would find it hard to write something that wasn't what I wanted to read also. And then so the same is true. I'm drawn to stories. I realized I'm drawn to stories about outsiders, and the stakes are kind of high with an outsider who wants to be an insider and is like trying to for something that's slightly out of reach. And so those are some of the books that I've been drawn to in my life. And I'm also drawn to like female power struggles. But all by way of saying, I think that I like to read what I like to write, and vice versa. Yeah.
Well, let's say that the word genre already implies like definition and a particular structure. Literary fiction sometimes proceeds without any apparent plot, whereas if you're writing in the crime fiction area or genre, there are certain conventions or narrative structures that you need to follow, and that can be a very good thing, especially for a new writer. Is that it gives you like a scaffolding. My friend Laurie King and I talked about this when she wrote her first book. It gives you a scaffolding for your story, and what can become fun after a while, what I think is really fun, being grounded in the basics, because I've been reading it forever, is to see what you can do with the general convention and then do it differently.
Yeah.
You mentioned Gone Girl. That's an example of being able to take a form and then do something different with it.
Yeah.
And, so the Gothic is a very large, very, welcoming, so to speak, and your opportunities to do things are in it. Agatha Christie, a lot of the reason people admire her is that she would take a basic convention and turn it on its head. She would have she did one of the first unreliable narrators ever, where the person who told you the story turned out to be the killer. And everybody went foul, and she's going, no, it worked. So, that I think for me, that's a lot of the fun, is to see what people are doing now with these older forms that I have been reading for so long.
Yeah, and I think you have to kind of know the genre well to be able to play
Yeah.
with it, to be able to know what has been done a lot, and what the reader is expecting, to be able to then turn it on its head, you know?
Surprise them. Did you have a question, sir? I saw your hand up earlier, but maybe we moved past you.
Ask what, as two authors, what's your favorite part of the process? Is it the discovery or is it the polishing? Like
All right,
Stephen
so-
King on writing says it's excavation and then craft polishes what you've already written. So what's your favorite part? Is it the finding the story or is it the polishing?
Okay, so the question is, what's your favorite part of the process? Is it finding the story or is it polishing it?
Well, for me, it's polishing it, but I don't know if I'd use the word polishing. It's more like I like it if I have a draft. There's something in front of me, and I can work with that. And it might be really bad what I have in front of me, but it's something as opposed to like sitting with a blank page. Like,
Well, it's the scaffolding.
Yes,
You've built
exactly.
the scaffolding, and now you have to like make the building. Frame it in.
exactly, yes. That's the stage that I enjoy the most.
Yeah, I completely agree. I hate drafting. I hate that blank page. But I was talking about this with another author recently. The highs of drafting are higher than anything else. When you write a scene that feels right and it came out of nowhere, it's the best feeling in the world. But the problem is it's like so much pulling teeth and like trudging through that I much rather would have something that's already there and I can shape it and polish it or revise it, move things here and make it better. It's a lot more comfortable.
Yeah, definitely.
I can say, having been around this for a long time, that the advent of the computer has made the writing process incredibly easier as it used to be if you had to write it by hand or if you had to type it. I earned my way through one of my graduate degrees as the department secretary in an engineering department at a university, and I'm telling you, they just brought in the Selectric with the key, and everything was Greek formulas, and all the rest of it, and And when I look back at that, and I think today you would just, there it is on the keyboard, or you could just pick another symbol or something. It was a nightmare.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't really want to revise
That's true.
because
You
it was
kind of
just so much work.
This is it.
Yeah.
I'm writing it, and that's
I
it.
know. Well,
I can't imagine because I mentioned I use Scrivener, which is this program. Do you use Scrivener?
I don't, but I've thought about it. I haven't done it yet.
It's just a program like instead of using Microsoft Word. And I have been using it for a long time, but it has all these different features where you can have each chapter is kind of a different file that you can just pull up really quickly. You can move them around. You can color code them. And I kind of can't even imagine trying to write a novel on just Microsoft Word. So I can't imagine trying to write it with a typewriter or by hand.
well, people did, and
I
I
know.
I often think that the reason the Golden Age mysteries were shorter was because that was the case. So, well, ladies, it's been a real pleasure to have you. Thank you for a great conversation. Audience, thank you for your attention. Virtual audience, thank you very much. And if you would now like to get your book signed and talk to the authors individually, that would be great. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we'll just sort of move those chairs that direction.